Ryan here. I'll be speaking with Gabrielle Phillip Crawford. So she's a senior researcher right now. She does a lot of like program evaluation, a lot of quantitative work. So we talk a lot about her current role, and then we also kind of talk about the importance of like communities, because she founded this group. It's called Recovering Academics. So it's like a Slack group that really kind of helps people leave academia or maybe consider leaving academia, and they provide like really free resources. So like if you have a resume that you want someone to look at, like they do that type of stuff, or just general like emotional support. It really is seems like a very like beneficial community. So outside of that, she also founded this. It's this company called Next Draft LLC with a few others. So the goal of that company is really to kind of advise graduate students who are kind of exploring different career paths. So there's a lot of benefits there as well. So that's kind of like the goal of the interview, and just hope you enjoy. Before we kind of get into your current company, Next Draft LLC, I did want to talk about your kind of professional role. I believe as a senior researcher at your current company. Can you tell me more about that? Maybe what does your day-to-day responsibilities look like?
Sure, yeah. So I work for Social Policy Research Associates. So it's a research consulting company based in California in Oakland. I work remote from Minnesota. And you're right, I'm a senior research associate there. And what that tends to mean is I work mostly on federal government contracts, some state level contracts, some foundation work as well. And we're basically doing a lot of program evaluation. So when you see different initiatives rolled out by, for example, Housing and Urban Development, Department for Labor, say rolling out an initiative around apprenticeship or a particular housing voucher program, there's always built into that funding stream a need for a third party evaluator. So our company is one of many players in that space that fills that role. And so my work might take a variety of different forms depending what role I play in a given project, but it can include anything from project management down to specific individual contributor tasks. So I'm a quantitative researcher, so I do a lot of the number crunching pieces of it, a lot of survey research and survey development. So yeah, a lot of things that kind of directly carried over from my academic life.
Yeah, and like, so what are some of those tools that you're using? Because I know you talked about the quantitative
Mhm.
element. Is it kind of like Excel, R, Python, maybe all of them?
I'm not a Python user yet. I
Okay.
want to learn it, but right now R, Excel, and then for survey development, for work I use Alchemer. I also am a big fan of Qualtrics. So
Yeah.
for survey building, those are my go-tos.
Yeah, I was gonna say I should have mentioned Qualtrics because I know that one is an industry standard. And what was the other one you mentioned? Like Alchem?
Alchemer.
Alchemer. I don't think I've heard of that one. Would you suggest
I
like people like academics primarily who are interested in research outside of academia to like maybe explore this tool?
I think that I would say what survey development tool you explore
Mhm.
doesn't matter as much as knowing how to build questions well, because the interface for all the different programs, they're fairly similar and they're fairly intuitive. I had never used Alchemer before this position, and it took me a very short period of time to get up and running and figure out how to program it. Um, yeah, user-friendly interface, but it's the knowing how to craft questions well
I can
that
definitely see that. Yeah, with that. Yeah, and it's definitely about the outcome and making sure that like yeah, that you know how to use the tool. It's so that's very important. And I wonder like so you had a previous role, I think as like a research manager at Benefits
Mhm,
Data Trust. So was
mhm.
this role similar to kind of what you're doing now in terms of like survey research?
It was similar in some ways. So my research team at Benefits Data Trust was internal facing. So what I mean by that is at SPR, my current job, I'm
Mm.
evaluating programs or research projects that other people um, ran, essentially. So
Okay.
it's sort of, HUD deployed a particular program and I'm evaluating to see how it went. At Benefits Data Trust, I was evaluating internal programs.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
did the work was focused on closing the benefits access gap, so providing people who are eligible for SNAP or WIC or TANF for other public benefits with access to
Mm.
that. So we did a lot of outreach to potentially eligible people by mail or text. And so I was evaluating the effectiveness of different kinds of outreach campaigns.
Yeah, and so like when you got this role, like how did you actually find it? So was it
Mhm.
like through LinkedIn or did you just talk to people right like as you were kind of
For,
networking? For the research
yeah,
manager.
so it definitely looked, so each of the roles I've held outside of academia, getting them looked very different.
Mhm.
So when I was first leaving academia, that was 2022, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a network outside of academia. I
Mhm.
didn't even know what jobs existed. I didn't know what skills transferred, how they transferred. So there was a lot of guesswork. There was a lot of kind of just trying things and sometimes failing. Um, the market was better then. Like there were definitely more job opportunities. It's a little tougher right now.
Yeah.
So I applied over the course of the spring semester in 2022. So from January to May, I was applying for jobs, and I did end up having referrals for a handful of positions, but actually every interview I got was from a cold application.
Uh,
Um, and I would say I found most of those on LinkedIn,
yeah.
some on I also used Idealist as a job board. So it tends to be sort of nonprofit, mission-driven organizations.
Yeah.
And those were my primary go-tos.
Yeah. And
Um,
so did oh, sorry to interrupt.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say like so I know you're talking a little bit about these kind of various strategies that you're using for job searching. So like do you think that that strategy would differ than maybe what it would be now? Like would you suggest people to take like a similar approach or do you really have to think differently with this job market?
I think, well, I think just overall it seems harder right now, and it seems like it's
Mhm.
taking folks longer
Yeah.
to land that first job leaving academia. The first
Yeah.
one is the hardest,
I
always.
agree with that.
For my second job search, I had certainly a much better network,
Mhm.
and I did a much more targeted search first time around. And I know there are many people you'll talk to who were searching for 6 months or a year and applied to hundreds of places. So I feel like I was lucky kind of both times around. First time around, I think I applied for probably close to 40 jobs, interviewed for roughly 10 companies,
Yeah.
ended up with one offer, withdrew from a couple of other processes. Second time around was in January, no, this last November and December. I think I applied for 10 jobs
Wow.
and got two offers out of that.
That's a good issue.
So,
That's very good.
and the reason that was so much better is my network, and not
Yeah.
necessarily direct referrals. Those can be great, but
Mhm.
for I my target for jobs is mission driven organizations. So I'm looking
Mhm.
for nonprofits, public sector. I'm actually at a for-profit company right now, but it's very mission driven and also an
Mhm.
employee owned company, which definitely changes the dynamic of it. Um, but what I had the best luck with was mining those kind of second degree connections in my network of finding jobs I was interested for, looking to see, do I know anyone who knows anyone at the company, and asking for an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to know, like, there's a cat in the background. I should have moved. So that little
Mine
shake
are
is my
closed
cat.
out of this room.
Yeah, her name is Violet. She's cute, but I didn't realize she'd be doing that on the call. But anyways, so I just want to make sure I get the timeline right. So I
Yeah.
think it was around like I think the spring of 2022. It seemed like that you
Mhm.
founded Recovering Academics. So for
Yep,
those unfamiliar, can you tell me a little bit more about the formation of this group, maybe the motivations for creating it?
sure. So as I said, I kind of started my own job search in January of 2022, and
Mhm.
I won't get into the
Yeah.
academics listening to this know why academics are leaving leaving
Right.
academia. We don't need to
Gotcha.
rehash that. But as I was starting my job search, I kind of figured out several of us at my university who were all figured out that we were job hunting. And we started meeting as a small group every week just to
Mhm.
support each other and kind of counter some of the gaslighting that can come from university administrations and to offer, practical support on like how do I handle this kind of interview question or what does your resume look like and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful because when I started my search, I didn't know anyone else who had left a tenure track position. So I was on the tenure track. I was a year away from getting tenure. Um, and I didn't know anyone else in that position. And so meeting with other people at my university was really helpful. But then I started thinking, like, surely there are more of us out there who are in this situation. And I kind of put an initial call out on LinkedIn to see if people were interested.
Mhm.
Got, maybe a dozen or so responses.
Mhm.
Initially, a small group of us met. I think this was like April 2022, and we've been meeting weekly since then. So we have
Nice.
weekly meetings on Zoom and we have a Slack workspace,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
over 270 members now.
Oh, wow.
So what the I know it's
That's a good
grown a
amount.
lot
Yeah.
from that
Yeah,
initial
absolutely.
dozen. So what the group is it's free. It
Mhm.
is peer support. We are not coaching, we are not mentoring, we're not any kind of sort of structured agenda to how we do things. It's really a place for people to break down that isolation around leaving academia. There's a lot of myths around that. There's a lot of feelings of failure for people who
Yeah.
decide to leave. There's a lot of fear of the unknown, of how do I navigate this? Who am I if I'm not a professor?
Mhm.
Um, and there's certainly a lot that one-on-one coaching can do to support people, but there's also a lot that just being in community with people who get it can do.
Yeah,
You can
I definitely.
just see, oh, I'm not alone. It's not just my university. It's not just me.
Yeah, and I think it definitely can help people who maybe might have not have like the financial resources. Because I know you kind of talk about like resume help. So like for instance, like
Hmm.
maybe if someone's leaving and they're like, hey, like can someone look at my resume, but I don't really have a lot to
Yeah.
spend. Like just like it seems like if someone could just reach out and be like, hey, can you just like look
Hmm.
at it? Is there structurally something wrong with it? Like to me, like
Yep.
those like even just someone like glancing at it for me helped a lot. But does that kind of happen
Yeah.
when people are kind of
It
doing just
happens a
ad hoc
lot.
help? Yeah, that
We've
definitely
got
see
we've
that.
got a whole channel for that kind of stuff on
Yeah.
on our Slack. So people will share resumes and ask for feedback. People who are trying to figure out how to navigate LinkedIn will
Mhm.
post things like, "Hey, can you guys look at this post I'm thinking of putting out there?" Or
Oh,
even,
that's cool.
I've posted this thing. People, please amplify it. I'm trying to get this message out there. Or
Nice.
a lot, we have a channel for open jobs. So a lot of us
Mm,
are still paying attention to the job boards, even if we're not actively searching. So we'll
mm,
share open positions there for group members. We also just have space on there where people can celebrate wins, where people
mm.
can share challenges that they're experiencing, not for
Wow.
any advice necessarily, but just have other people there who can be like, I get it, that really sucks. You
Wow.
know?
Yeah, no, that sounds really like helpful and impactful. And like had a
Yeah.
question about the importance, but I think you've already really kind of explained that. But I do wonder in terms of
Yeah.
like managing this community, and I've kind of
Hmm.
considered it myself, like trying to look at maybe Discord, but I feel like there's probably a lot of time that goes into like just the managing part of a community like this. Can you maybe speak to like how you like approach just like making sure like cultivating this community, making sure it just like
Hmm.
continues to exist? Like, can you speak more to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so I don't do it on my own.
Hmm.
There are some founding members who've been there from day one,
Yeah.
um, who are okay with me naming them. We have a general rule for the community that you can't name or identify any members outside of the group
Hmm.
because a lot of folks, when they're leaving academia, are trying to do so covertly.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And trying to leave toxic environments and it's doesn't feel safe to them to participate if there's not at least we can never guarantee confidentiality, but we do ask everyone who joins to sign a to sign on to the group guidelines, which includes that. But Dana Layton and Jennifer Beach are my kind of co-administrators. We've never had to do any kind of moderation on the Slack. In 2 years, we've never had people posting or sharing anything that's inappropriate or violates group guidelines. It's a remarkably kind and generous group in terms of how they interact with each other and support each other. For our meetings, I mean, basically the extent of my kind of work for the group, I post about it sometimes on LinkedIn, which usually every time I mention it, I have, 10 or 12 people reach out and want to join, which is fabulous. That's how we grow. Um, but that's, you follow me on there, I probably post about it, a handful of times a year. So I'm not doing heavy content on that. Otherwise, I maintain there's a Gmail account associated with the group that myself and the other administrators can access. I send out a weekly reminder for our Zoom meeting with the access information for that.
Mhm.
And any new members, that's a Google form that they fill out, and then I have to send them the invitation and the information on how to join Slack. But for our meetings, we never have a set agenda. The
Yeah.
conversation's driven by whatever's top of mind for people attending.
Yeah.
So there's very little that actually goes into it time-wise, other
No,
than the
that's
time to be on Zoom.
yeah, no, that sounds really beneficial, and I do want to pivot slightly because it's still kind of related to like career-wise. So, I know that you recently made this announcement on LinkedIn. I kind of seen it on your profile as well. You're one of the founding members of something called Next Draft. It's called Next Draft.
Yeah,
So can you talk more about like what this company is, like the types of
sure.
services that you provide, and kind of like who your audience is?
Sure, yeah. So, I am, as you said, one of the co-founders of Next Draft, and my co-founders are Christina Spiker, who's an art historian who's still in academia, but navigating that transition process, and Jessica Shropshire, who's another social psychologist, as I am, who is working in user experience research. And the three of us, this does kind of build on the kind of work that the Recovering Academics group does. So the three of us kind of came together, and one of the driving thoughts behind this was part of what I see with recovering academics is people leaving mid-career who are
Mhm.
absolutely panicked. They don't
Yeah,
know
I
who they are outside of their work. They don't know what they can do. They don't know how to define their skills. There's just this, for people who are experts in learning, like we're remarkably bad at setting ourselves up to learn about how to do this transition.
I feel that.
Because you don't get people treating it, like you could approach it as a research project. What do I need to do to get from point A to point B? What does point B look like? But instead, you have people just going, I don't know who I am or what I could do. Like it's just
Yeah, like
panic.
it's a
Um,
very like internal like conflict, like because it seems like a
yeah.
lot of folks like have the skills. Like I feel like most do. I think they just it's like translation and communication. I think that's kind of really
Hmm.
that needs work. But
So our thinking is, what if we could reach people before they're panicking at mid-career and they don't
yeah,
know
I
what
know.
to do? What if from the beginning, folks were able to make an informed decision about career
Mhm.
paths to pursue? Our goal is not that everyone should leave academia and that this is a bad career path for every PhD. Um, but there are real pros and cons to choosing an academic career, just as there are for any other career.
Hmm.
So the hope is that we can provide services to PhD students that will let them understand, first of all, who they are and what they value, and thinking about those values in very concrete terms. So, not the abstract, like I value family, but how near do I physically need to be to my family? Okay, what impact does that have on the kind of jobs that I'm looking for? And if I want to be within a certain distance of my family who's located in this place, how much money do I need to make to live there? Okay, now what does that mean in terms of the kind of job I might look for? So we're trying to make it very concrete so that when people are evaluating job ads for academic jobs, for non-academic jobs, they can really think, well, what do I need? What are the deal breakers for me? How can I keep my not keep my options open? I kind of
Hmm.
have a reaction when faculty says, keep your options open. Um,
Yeah.
but it's more knowing that there are multiple paths to success and being able to make an informed choice between those paths rather than um, again getting midway through an academic career and panicking.
Yeah, and I do wonder, like, so what gap does this fill in terms of? So I know that universities, like,
Mhm.
some might have like a career coach, maybe for the department. Maybe there's like
Yeah.
a faculty member appointed to help with like with career questions. So does Next Draft kind of like fill this void that exists in academia and these academic institutions? Like, are they
Hmm.
can essentially like paying you to like help advise students or just like present or just maybe can you speak a little bit more like how
Yeah.
that works in practice?
So, we do offer sort of standalone workshops and things like that, but the I guess I'd say like kind of signature program that we provide is typically a semester long,
Mhm.
and it would include we usually include three workshops, sort of starting, middle, end, and then one-on-one mentoring for students provided by an industry mentor who shares their same PhD disciplinary background.
Wow. That's a good
So,
that's a good
yeah, go ahead.
match. Yeah. No, I was gonna say that's a good match because I think when they have that similar background, I think that does add to add something that
Absolutely.
yeah.
You don't want the generic, of course, your skills transfer. You want someone to say, here's how I talked about my PhD in French Victorian literature when
Yes.
I was transitioning out, or here's how I talked about my research on the
Mhm.
history of the tea trade, or whatever obscure
Mhm.
topic folks have studied, particularly for folks in the humanities, where it's harder to see those connections.
Absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, sorry. Yeah, that definitely is like a plus, and I definitely see kind of the benefit of it. And I
Hmm.
guess like when I was looking on LinkedIn, I know you have like this tagline that I think I wrote it down. It mentions about like that you're helping guide students into like fulfilling careers. So can you speak maybe more to this? And I really only have like I think 7 minutes because it's Zoom. But
Hmm.
can you just like maybe a good endpoint would be just kind of like how you define a fulfilling career, and maybe does a
Sure.
fulfilling career equal like a mission-driven company? Can it be something outside of that?
It can definitely be outside of that. So, say first of all, in terms of, I didn't address your question about filling a niche. So, some
Yes.
universities provide kind of tailored support for graduate students, but that's actually quite rare. It
Mhm.
tends to be, if there's support, it's support from faculty for pursuing academic careers, or it's more generic support tailored for undergrads that might not always fit well for a PhD student. And that mentoring piece, we've identified one other university that actually offers in-house that mentoring, and that's a UK-based institution.
I think I'm
Um,
I think I might have heard of them, but they're I don't know.
yeah,
But
they do some fantastic work. But in terms of fulfilling careers, I don't think there's any one definition for that. I think it really
mm,
has to do with finding something that's aligned with your personal values, and that we don't have any um, we don't have a personal stake in sort of what that looks like. We've each figured out
mm,
what that looks like for ourselves, But
Yeah.
that might be the nonprofit space, it might be public service, it might be the, big tech industry, whatever
Mhm.
is the right fit for an
Yeah.
individual. So it's really helping them figure out their own, what will bring them to what they see as success.
Yeah. And so just a final question. So do you have anything that maybe we haven't mentioned through this discussion that you think would be important for anybody who is at that kind of like crisis moment right now that just doesn't know what to do really, like where to go next? Do you have any
I
closing
think
thoughts?
I think the first thing is just to talk to people. People, particularly folks who've left academia, are very, very generous with their time and energy. A lot of us are want to give back and don't want other people to kind of have to go through the struggles and the isolation that we might have experienced. So talk to people is probably the main thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely endorse that that idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it, Gabrielle, just for taking the time to speak with me. But yeah, if anybody's interested in Next Draft or the about recovering academics, just feel free to reach out to Gabrielle, and I'll make sure that the contact info is there in the comments. But
Mhm.
again, thank you for this interview.